is Brand Innovators, the community, right? I always like to spend a few minutes talking about, your career, right? People are here to hear you. Well, and your path to becoming a CMO of Internova Travel Group. Nice gig.
Yeah.
Uh, how'd you get here?
Yeah. How did I get here? Yeah.
Uh,
Sometimes I ask myself the very question.
right, right,
Yeah.
right.
How did this happen?
How did this
Where am I?
happen? Right.
Yeah. My background's always been in ad agencies. I mean, I grew up in love with advertising and marketing. I found it just a fascinating world, and I got into it, right out of school, and happened across a great job at a agency that was, fantastic at the time, called Saatchi and Saatchi. And I rode that wave through and worked my way through various ad agencies. And while I worked very, very hard at it, sometimes you get very fortunate in life, and I consider myself fortunate to have worked for some of the best agencies and some of the best people around. Um, and hey, I had one of the best jobs in the world. I traveled around the world and ran Budweiser's business globally, for an agency called Anomaly out of New York, which is, one of the top dogs. And I thought, I'll never get a better job than this, going around promoting beer. But if I'm honest, I kind of fell out of love with the business, and the business became a little bit mundane. It started to be infiltrated from more of a, I spent more time negotiating with procurement than I did thinking strategically about how I was going to advance my clients' businesses.
Sure.
And that's when I started thinking about what's next for me, and various channels I went through. I think we're all aware that when we stop learning, we get stagnant as A types. So I started venturing in, and you know what, I took some time, and I left the position that I was with at the time. I had gone back to, I'm Canadian, I went back to Toronto. I was a president of an ad agency there. And then I just took some time and walked away from it. It wasn't working out for me, and thought about what's next. And the travel world, I just was looking for, where do I think there is monster opportunity to innovate, to drive insights, to do things different, and to make some things happen. That's what makes us tick, right? Is, how can we win? What's a juicy business problem that we can chew on? What scares us? I love that. Let's get excited about what's next and what we can do. And that led me to, speaking with JD O'Hara, the CEO of Internova, and creating a relationship. And the long story short is that we kind of did, which was fantastic. It's like, let's not interview with 4 people and then decide that you're the CMO. Let's chew on some business problems and do, I don't know what it ended up. Maybe it was a 4 to 6 month interview of doing some consulting with them, and getting into that building and meeting some just unbelievable people, that had an appetite for what I was looking for. Because what I didn't want to do again was make that mistake, to get into this building and get all excited and then find there's no appetite in this building for change. There's no appetite for innovation. It might have just been the CEO, but it wasn't. And so I got very excited. And then, long story short, serendipitous, here I am, CMO of Internova Travel Group.
Well, and you're right. It's sometimes you have to look for the culture within an organization, right? Because
Yeah.
sometimes it is the PR folks saying something or the CEO saying something, and you get in and you really realize, yeah, the culture isn't ready no matter what that guy says or what the other guy says.
Right.
Before I actually, I do want to pick up obviously on this and find out what your day to day and what that scary is like. But you said something a little earlier, Brent. I just want to go back to it, and
Yeah.
that was you just kind of said, "Hey, when I was young, I kind of rode, kind of rose up, through this, and this." Can you just touch on a minute what that is like? I feel like there's a lot of young folks. I refer to them as the kids because I'm an old man.
Yeah.
These are 35-year-old people with 3 kids of their own, but I still refer to them as the kids. All of
Yeah.
you, sorry. I don't know, just advice for them and that sort of thing. I think folks like us take it for granted. Oh, we just rose the ladder. What's that? How does that happen?
You know what? I think young people are in a better position today than we were, because they're more courageous than we were. And I know I'm dating myself, but I don't complain about young people. in business right now. I know a lot of people do. Maybe I'm lying. Maybe I do every once
I
in a
know a
while.
lot of them are damn smarter than I
Yeah,
am.
but I think what they've done is they're not accepting the status quo, and I didn't early in my career either. I was, I'm obviously an A type. I'm outspoken, and I was courageous and hungry. And I know those sound like just basic things, but they're hard to train. You either have it or you don't. I mean, a lot of people, you're either supposed to be in these types of industries or you're not. And can you learn? Can you fake it a little bit? Yeah, maybe. But I think the people that really accelerate their careers are recognized from great leaders and promoted accordingly, because in this world that I'm in now, and then my previous life in advertising, it was about thinking. Are you a strategic thinker naturally? You can teach somebody to be a great thinker, but if you have it naturally, and then you multiply that with the courage to speak up, even as a junior in a room full of, very senior people, uh, if you're smart, you're going to go places. And, I was fortunate that way. But I think young people, my advice for they're better seated than we are. I mean, I'm shocked at, like, they have a lot of courage. I sit in rooms and I'm like, wow, I never said that to
I
my
would have
boss.
said that.
I remember, I mean, we grew up in the era of you get there before your boss and you leave after them.
Right, right, right. No doubt. All right, very helpful. Thank you. So yeah, let's pick up on your scary day to day now. What's your day like walking into your new building?
It
And what
was
sort of
fantastic
challenge do you
walking
have
in the
done?
new building, which, we were speaking of, that it was the first time I just got on a plane for the first time at the beginning of the week, which was fantastic. So now we're returning to some sense of normalcy. I don't, apologies, we have to do it this way now, but I'm not a fan of Zoom. I'm a people person, whiteboards everywhere. Paint my office in a whiteboard and let's get down to work and thinking. But right now it's still, we're drinking from a fire hose, right? We're in that strategic planning phase and really understanding what's happening. And, it's changing at a pace that none of us could have imagined. I mean, we had a great session yesterday. Now I'm in Alexandria. I was in New York a few days ago, but at our office in Alexandria, and we were talking about how we were looking back and saying, we thought this was, we all did. It's go home for 2 weeks and then this is going to change. So, going through that in the past and learning from it and saying, let's assume nothing. Let's push ourselves now. Our session yesterday was, what does the future look like? Because let's not assume that, even the news this morning, I was watching the Today Show and we're like, here in the United States, our cases are going up again and these variants are rampant. And then, the anti-vaxxers are dominant. That's going to potentially change next week, or they might start declining again and it won't. And we'll all be thinking more about travel. But I think pushing ourselves to do that, aligning our functions accordingly, and then really trying to, my entire world has been insight based. So if the Delta variant does dominate, how is that going to affect the insights into travel? Into Europe is going to be different than into South America, is going to be different than Mexico, right? So I think that now the day to day it's tiring because it's assume nothing. And what you assume today and what you hypothesize and plan for today, you need to be prepared to throw it out and to fail fast. And that's okay, because the world's changed. It's not going to go back to exactly the way it was. I certainly hope it does. And I'm sure at some point we'll be looking back at it and saying, oh, remember that pandemic and how things were affected. But I think now the day to day really is about, it's almost like, it's segment planning. It's, if this happens, this happens. If this happens, though, this happens. And then how do you do that efficiently and effectively so that you're not, constantly just throwing money away? I mean, hey, we're in a business that, of course, we're in travel. There's nobody's celebrating the EBITDA numbers that we're delivering right now.
Yeah. There's I've heard that from other agencies, from other clients. The word last year was certainly flexibility was the big thing. And like you said, as far as strategic planning, all the way down to your media plan and is it cancelable and all of that.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody's had to fall in line.
Yeah, and it seems like that is a trend that is going to continue for some time.
Yeah, for sure. There's no question. It's going to continue, and we're going to continue to drive ourselves crazy. But that's why we do this job. That's why we're in marketing, and that's why we love what we do, because it's never the same, right? It's not repeatable.
Yeah, no doubt. All right. So a month ago, you guys launched your first consumer-facing ad
Yeah.
campaign, Go Human. I actually went on iSpot last night, reviewed the creative.
Oh, great.
I think it's outstanding that it really hits on the heart of your value proposition.
Absolutely.
Talk to us about it. What provoked it at this move? How'd you go about doing all this? It's a great piece of work, and I'm fascinated to find out more about it.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, looking back again and saying, how did you end up here, as a CMO, let alone how did you end up with this campaign and what made it happen? So, I mean, I kind of looked at it, and these were the early discussions with JD was, traditionally the industry across the board has done a very good job of, talking to existing customers. And stimulating travel, and the technology that we have that allows us to say, if you did this, you'll probably like this. It's almost like Amazonish. But what it hasn't done is it never really did much to work the top of the funnel. And I even went so far as to say, and if you exaggerate the truth, or exaggerate the point to make the point, that once upon a time, maybe the industry of the advisors could have slowed down or even stopped the OTAs. But what I found very peculiar from an advertising background was the entire industry kind of sat on its hands and let them come in and let them spend hundreds of millions and even billions of dollars. I mean, I think it was last week that I read that Expedia's marketing budget this year is coming out of a pandemic, I think is $5 billion. So I found it fascinating that, wow, we all scenario plan, and, coming out of the beer business, and, we have to tackle there was a time when it was all the craft breweries and what have you. And, but a company like InBev wasn't going to let everybody just walk all over them. But here was an industry that I found fascinating, and that's what I got excited about. And I was like, wow, you just kind of let these guys walk in, spend money like it was water at the top of the funnel, go from I'd never heard of you, to Expedia is this dominant company, and not a lot about it. So what happened when the pandemic hit is, having an attentive audience with we all know in the fragmented media that we deal with today, we all know that to have an attentive audience is very, very challenging. We as advertisers always assume that people want to hear what we're saying, and they even want to consume it in the order that we serve up the ads when we present them to a client. That couldn't be further from reality. But what led to the conversation with JD was, I certainly hope we'll never have a more attentive audience than we do today. We saw these horror stories come out. I mean, I think it was only a month and a half ago that, Mr. Trudeau in Canada bailed out Air Canada and said, you have to give people refunds. Well, guys, you should have done that a year ago. So here we are in this pandemic, we're reading these horror stories. We got people on hold for days. And all of a sudden, there's a little crack. And my world is where there's a crack, there's an opportunity. And, I hate to quote Churchill and say, let's not let a great crisis go to waste. But I think that people had to stop and really recalibrate and figure out, what is the opportunity that's presenting it here? And it revealed the weakness of the OTAs and the algorithms and the bots. And what we ended up putting on the wall was, algorithms, bots, and OTAs are built to do one thing and one thing really well: sell. But that's it. That's where it ends. So just maybe we have an opportunity to start pushing human beings again, and that led to the campaign of Go Human, Book Human. And it's been, it's been a tremendous journey. It's been a lot of fun. I think we have our advisor base very enthusiastically embracing, like, wow, this is a whole level of support that this organization is pushing our wares and our benefits forward. And I think it has a lot of legs. That makes me most excited about this campaign, if I'm honest. I've been, fortunate enough, as I've mentioned, to work on some great campaigns, but it's either us, we fall out of love with our own work faster than consumers do, and then, or clients will, and then you're on. But if you read some of the headlines, the lead line of the campaign is, if machines can't dream, how can they book your dream vacation? And we got so excited that I even went so far as to say, I'm not a writer. And everybody in the room at the time was not a writer. And I said, I bet everyone in this room can write 5 of these headlines that could make it into the airwaves very easily, because it's just, there's such real insights in that. 0% of bots can talk to the manager, and they can't talk, right? And then you can see how it lends itself to corporate travel, to the various areas of travel, to families, the insights into families, and an algorithm doesn't particularly know how important it is to make the last flight out, right? So there's richness there. So we're really excited about it. Really excited about where this can go.
So where does this? What's the media plan look like for a message like this? Like in your beer days, I'm sure in one part you're trying to speak to the distributors and also speak to the consumers. So here you just sort of mentioned, well, it's my my agents, but also the consumer. So how's this message getting out?
Yeah, I mean, right now we're playing around a lot, because this is as well that I have to be sensitive, that I can't be silly and say, hey, you know what? Mr. O'Hara, Expedia spends $5 billion. Can I have $5 billion? We have to be responsible and have to be smart. And so what we're doing is we're spending a lot of time, I call it test, learn, adapt, and listen and learn, right? Because I'm spending a lot of time learning, let me tell you. So what we're doing is obviously social media is a huge component of it. And then YouTube, the long form video of the Android spot, the film that we shot, is we're learning a lot from. Would I love to see this as a Super Bowl commercial? Absolutely. Might that be in the future? I don't know. But what we're doing is we're learning what's working, what is getting attention, we were so excited. I mean, I said to JD that, everybody used to wait, all the PR, outlets used to wait and see what's Budweiser going to do for Super Bowl. And, we might get coverage of 30, 35 outlets. And I think we're up to 100. I might be mistaken by now. It may be more. I think we're at 170 outlets picked up this story. And what was more fascinating, it was everything from the travel periodicals all the way to Fast Company. So I'm like, okay, so we've struck a chord.
Yeah,
good.
Right, something.
And I'm always reminding myself, because we get don't assume you know anything, right? Like, but let the consumers and let the industry tell you whether what you've done is successful or not before you start patting yourself on the back. So what we've done is responsibly gone in with some good investment in multiple channels, and as many that we think that we should be spending money on right now, and then let that tell us where we go next. And the media agency, as we speak, is planning for what might be next.
And then you just might have answered my next thing. All right, great. You're putting it out there. You're getting this data back. How does data inform? Because everyone talks about big data, and all this data, and it's an algorithm data. But how do you translate these data points into actionable human things that you can react to? Like, do you have a formal mechanism to doing that, or you just kind of take it in and see what the numbers are telling you?
Data is a funny thing, right? I mean, there's no shortage of data, but there's certainly a shortage of what the hell do we do with it, and how do we package it, and what do we do? I mean, I read it, I can't remember where the article was, but I think it was like 5 years ago. It was like everything you just said it, big data, small data, every single article, everything that you were reading was about data. But data for the sake of data doesn't work either. It needs to be really purpose driven. So I love it for the fact of test, learn, adapt. And that's where I like social media a lot. Because you can get, for a minimal investment, an immediate read on what's really going on. You can have, remember the world of A/B testing. Well, now it's ABCDEFG testing. I mean, you can test anything at the speed of light. You can get immediate return and figure out what's working. And what I like about it as well that the industry's moved to is that we think this is going to be incredibly successful, and there's no way that could be successful. And that's where I say we have to check our egos and our resumes to say, no, we don't know, right? Like I shared a story that got some good laughs. I think it was a few months ago, where I said, if I imagined walking into NBC and pitching Dancing with the Stars, I would have expected to have been kicked out of the room and security told to never let me back in the building. And I couldn't have been more wrong. Here we are. It's a #1 show that's been running for 100 years now. Yeah. So that's just further evidence that we don't know anything. So let's use data to inform where we go and how we go there, and be careful in the process, because I like it for its insights. I don't like it for testing creative. I mean, there's a whole culture out there that is, from 100 years ago that's like, let's test our TV spots and, set up a panel of focus groups of 3 groups of 8 and let it tell us whether the spot's going to work or not. Well, no, that's a bad use of data. But I do like it for insights. I mean, the best strategic planners that I've ever worked with effectively use data and get to a conclusion. But, and to that end, nothing, it's just like go human. Funny enough, the best strategic thinkers are still going to take the data and come to a conclusion that's relevant. The data is not going to give you the answer. Oftentimes it asks more questions, is what I've said. So you have to be careful with it. And I don't know if that perfectly answers your question, but that shows again how amazing data can be, but how dangerous it can be as well.
Yeah, and no, I think you've answered it exactly, and you're right. It does sort of reflect back to go human. I'm seeing a trend. I'm seeing a trend here, Brandon. You're thinking, but it does, and and that's why I do think there's you need that analysis. People who just think data for data's sake, and the algorithm's going to pump out an answer. The answer still needs to inform some strategic thinking and decision making. So, yeah. So switching gears a little bit and back to the team building. Sure. Listen, you've been doing this a long time, and you've built, like you said, I mean, you've built tremendous teams. How do you build, nurture, mentor a culture that does think strategically, does think, and kind of the flip side of it, Brent, is, and I'm going to throw you a loop here, but what if you got someone on your team who doesn't think that way? Right. Just how do you build teams that you've done it so successfully?
Yeah, it's interesting that again, I've been really fortunate to have worked for some great leaders that taught me a lot of great things, and equally I've worked for some horrible right. dictator leaders that have taught me arguably more than the good ones did. But
it's amazing you remember those ones. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I have a few of those. Yes.
You know what? I think a lot of it has to do with check your ego and understand what you are as a leader. A leader that does or usurps or is always taking we all know that that's bad. So then what are we? I mean, we're facilitators, really. Creating conditions that are exciting, that allow people to innovate and to allow people to fail, make it safe. I have said more since I took this position on that, hey, I'm all for learning from failing. And the only way to innovate is to fail. Like I said, if the person just accepted that there's no way that NBC is going to ever buy a show that's a bunch of B and C list celebrities that are dancing, well, I wouldn't have gone and pitched it, but somebody was like,
someone did.
I think maybe I'm onto something. And somebody did. So whoever the group, that obviously was a group, I'm sure it wasn't one person, but the conditions were created to facilitate making mistakes, innovating, and getting down to, I keep saying, let's have some fun. We're in the travel business. I mean, I learned this well from the advertising business that is famous for having a good time. And we've all watched Mad Men, and there's certainly a lot of reality there. But celebrate reward successes, but celebrate and reward failures, because you took a crack at something that probably nobody else did. And there's nothing wrong with that. And then to your question about when somebody on your team isn't there, I find that when you have a high-powered, achieving team and somebody's on it that isn't there, they usually deselect themselves. And they realize it. And if they're not going to deselect themselves as a leader, you don't discourage that person and terminate them. You again create the conditions for their talents to be moved elsewhere. And you be responsible, and that is great leadership. What leadership isn't is you're not up to par with this high achieving team, so I got to let you go, right? If
it's just a matter of where.
A types. I mean, can you imagine, me hiring like 5 of me? Like, I would drive myself crazy, right? So I think that we have to take that into consideration and hire well-rounded people, create those conditions, and then let them deselect themselves or help them along to their next opportunity.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's been a few people I've, adopted on teams over the years, and you're like, oh, geez, how the hell did I get this guy? And then you're right. It's upon you as a leader they obviously have a strength. They're a human being. They have a strength, and you just need to find out where that is and have them succeed. Mm-hmm. Cool. So along with like building teams within your organization too, which you've built a lot of, you've also been around the world, hence our, the earlier comments about travel and all. How do you approach something in the U.S. as opposed to Canada, or differently than the UK, or so when you're doing this campaign, are you thinking, and how is it hitting internationally, or how do you handle the global aspect of everything that everything every major company needs to do now can't only be thought about in their region, it needs to be multi-region. So how do you think through that?
I think again, it's that humbleness. It's assume you know nothing. Right. I want to ask Target how their launch into Canada went. Right. They're like, well, of course. I mean, they look the same. They sound relatively the same. Yeah. So we're just going to walk in here with our ego and drop Target on Canada, and we're going to kill it. We're going to dominate. Yeah. I haven't seen anybody get it wrong faster and lose shareholders' money in the process. And that was evidence of ego. I think that you need to listen, and you need to pay attention and learn the insights into Canadians. I mean, you know what? I might have been guilty of it. When I moved to the United States years ago from Toronto and I landed in New York, I found out quickly how Canadian I was. Right? and that's not a positive or a negative. It's a reality. And my wife and I spoke of it at length. That, oh, wow, what we have been preaching, that we're different. And even in Canada, I mean, the province of Quebec, which is a French-speaking province, for those that might not be familiar, the insights into Quebec were completely different. The only top 10 TV show in Quebec that wasn't French-speaking was The Simpsons. Wow. It's fascinating. Wow. So when you're creating advertising, in that case, in my previous life, they probably should have a French-speaking celebrity, if you're going to use a celebrity, and not a Canadian one or not an American one, because it's going to fail. So I think the simplest answer is listen and learn. I mean, if there's something that back early in my career, I did go through a period, like everybody probably did, where I thought I knew much more than I did. And I think that, I had some great leadership that taught me that assume nothing, learn. There's where data comes into play as well. Land somewhere and ask yourself what's up. And I did in my previous lives as well have the benefit of global travel, and everywhere from Ho Chi Minh to Nigeria, to South America. And when you landed, you learned the culture in a hurry. And again, to have had those benefits of learning, like, wow, we don't know a damn thing. So it's all insight based. Learn how the insights differ, right? Americans and Canadians are different than Brits and Nigerians. So learn from it.
Yeah. I mean, I know when we, as Canoe, we went into Latin America a couple of years ago, and I just said, I at least need to learn a few Spanish words, if not only just to prove I'm, not some arrogant American who think I know everything. And it goes a long way. Just a bit of effort to just put that out there actually goes a long way.
Oh my God. I remember, I was in Canada actually, and I had a Chinese Uber driver with a bunch of friends. And when I got out of the Uber, I said, "Xie." And he looked at me like, "What the hell did you just say?" And my friends are like, "What did you say?" I said, "I just said thank you in Chinese." I said, "I learned that from, my clients when I used to go to Shanghai and Guangzhou.
Right. Right. Just those little bit can go a long way.
Yeah.
All right. Well, covering a lot of ground here. So taking this out, you got the new gig, finding out, where this goes. Not any predictions to hold you to, Brent, but what do you see the next 3 years like, as far as your company? I mean, what are the goals? What are your sort of personal goals within the organization? I mean, you must have come in, and within those 4 months of talking to everyone before coming in, must have had something on paper that says, it's probably going to look like X.
Um, I'm trying to figure out what the next 3 days is going to look like.
All right. What does day 4 look like? How's that?
Exactly. I mean, again, it's the spirit of always learning, always innovating. What does it look like? I mean, our challenge is to constantly be building real tangible value, from a marketing standpoint, and what we're doing internally, and constantly reminding ourselves our customers are our advisors, right? And our job is to set them up for success, to sell their consumers real, tangible, valuable experiences. And what we're selling today is certainly different than what we sold 16 months ago. The insights are completely different. Everything from, we're hearing this term revenge travel, and the insight into don't let another year go by to take that trip that's on your bucket list, all the way to safety, and where we're going with a family of 6 that's going to travel somewhere in safety. So being insight based and being current is really my wholehearted focus right now. What that looks like next week, Thursday, like we said, I woke up this morning and I was like, oh, we're doing this again. It's a different insight, right? So what our advisors are facing today is different than when they faced literally yesterday. Yesterday, people were like, everything's flat or declining. And today we hear on the news it's going up. And the media has become a little bit of an enemy, if I'm honest. The glorification of the negative is dominating, but I can't control that. But what I have to do is be ready for it. What's it look 3 years from now? I mean, hey, we want to build this company. We want to be, and we want advisors to go, there's absolutely no question. This is the organization that has our backs, that understands the insights into our consumers, which is the end consumer, is building real tangible value for us, is connecting with our suppliers and our partners to innovate and bring something different, right? If anybody in the industry can package air and a location and a hotel and maybe get you free breakfast, and that's fine. But you know what's going to really unlock the value of tomorrow? And if I had the answer today, I'd probably be retired. So I'll have to continue to work for it.
Well, it seems like you have, like you mentioned, as far as media, you can get that instant A, B, C, D, E, testing back, social media, all that. It seems like you do have this vast resource from your advisors, right? From the people you're serving. Do you have a formal mechanism as to how you get their insights and their clients, consumers' insights, or is it more ad hoc? How do you take
I
that?
mean, we have people communicating with our advisor base all the time. I mean, we have, like, I can't even imagine the amount of phone calls that are through a day, and learning and then passing that information on, and some of it's incredibly productive and some of it isn't, but you have to be able to, again, that's your data, right? And your data, again, is only as good as a human being deciphering it. So those individuals are passing real insights and real tangible opportunities, problems onto us constantly. And again, if we check our egos, we can listen and learn accordingly.
Well, yeah, certainly. Well, like any anytime I go to online reviews, right? Throw out the highs, throw out the lows.
Right.
Everyone's going to have their agenda, and hold to the middle. All right. Well, I believe if anyone had any Q&As, that you can click on the Q&A. I'm not quite sure how that's working, but if you can, please go ahead and do that. We're starting to wind down on our time, but one more question for me, Brent, and it really is on the same theme, and I think we've pretty much nailed the point of view here. But any last piece of advice for something that you were told that works, or something you figured out on your own? I mean, we certainly covered, the strategic thinking and all of that.
Yeah.
But anything else you would tell, the younger version of yourself?
I'll give credit to Carl Johnson from Anomaly. He used to walk through all the time, and it was painted on a few walls throughout the organization. It said, "Ask better questions." And I've added on to that when I communicate that to people, and I say, not only ask better questions, ask more questions and question everything. And that's learned from a strategic planning background that I've been fortunate enough to be part of. And the best planners that I've worked with question everything. What worked today isn't necessarily going to work tomorrow. It might, but it might not. So just question it, and just work hard to push yourself in that capacity. And I think that always delivers value. The package that you came up with today won't. The comp that you came up with today won't. The upfronts that you negotiated last year, question them, right? And then keep pushing yourself to innovate.
Well, especially when you said on the agency side, getting a little bored with that, when it was, hey, what's my plan? What's my media plan from last year? All right, let's tack on 5% and go out to lunch.
Yeah, we used to say to the media companies that, did you just copy and paste last year's and change the name and the date on it?
Yep, seen that happen.
Yeah.
That's great. I did see one question come in, and I think we've pretty much answered it in terms of, what are some of the permanent changes to the industry that are directly related to the pandemic? And I think your answer is, well, remain flexible.
Yeah, and it's just made everybody stop and assess, right? Just full stop. The world has changed. The marketing conditions have changed. The solutions have changed, and just stop and learn. And I'm excited for us, because I feel confident that this is the organization that's going to lead this industry, and we're going to watch a lot of people do what they did last year.
Yep. Fantastic. All right. Well, Brett, pleasure, sir. Sitting chatting with you. I hope that was informative and, if not, entertaining for everyone out there. Thanks for having us. And Diana, back to you.
Yes,
Thank you, guys.
Thank you both for being here. I really loved what you were talking about in terms of, taking risks and not being afraid to fail, to really take to make great creative, because obviously, if you're just too careful, we're not going to get there. And I love your analogy with the Dancing with the Stars, this kind of concept, because it's true. It's like, okay, well, what's not there? How can we imagine it? And how can we get it there? And I think that's going to go into a lot of the innovation and planning for where travel goes in the future, and how brands are communicating with consumers. So thank you both for your session. I am now going to pass it along.
Right. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Okay, so for our last session today, we have Jeannette Liendo, who's the Senior Vice President of Marketing and Communications at Mastercard Europe, and CEO of Ogilvy UK, Fiona Gordon. Obviously, being able to spend money and purchase goods is a huge part of the travel business, and would love to hear what's going on at Mastercard and the loyalty program.